Communication is just communicating information of any type. Conversation is always an exchange of information between at least two people. Talking about ourselves activates the same pleasure center in your brain as sex and heroin. It is very pleasurable to talk about what's going on in your head. Our species has only survived because of our conversational skills. Lately, we have seen this drop in healthy conversation, and for our species, that is a possible extinction event.
You know, I get paid for talking. That's what I do for a living. My most enjoyable experiences of people is hearing their stories, is hearing their conversations. That's the stuff that renews me and inspires me. Well, top of the morning to you, and welcome to It's a Good Life. I'm your host, Brian Buffini. And today we have somebody very special for you with the message I think that's going to be just right up your alley, something you really need and want to hear. Her name is Celeste Headlee. And she's a best-selling author and speaker, opera singer, which was the news to me. I didn't know about that. And she has her own podcast host. She's coming to her own studio today in D.C. And she's also given one of the 10 most watched TED Talks ever. 10 ways to have better conversations. Therein, why we need Celeste's info. I believe for 99% of you listening out today, better conversations at home, better conversations with every one of your clients, maybe even better conversations with yourself. And today we're going to cover her book, which is absolutely terrific. We Need to Talk, or as my aunt in New York says, we need to talk. And we're going to dive into this powerful guide for better conversation. Celeste, top of the morning to you, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're really looking forward to this. I mean, wow, it's universal content. I haven't really had anybody come up with that new in a long time. You know, I'm 40 years around the personal growth and development business. We've had probably hired 500 speakers during that time. We've interviewed on this show, you know, billionaires and this and that and the other. But it's been a long time since I heard anybody actually come up with something new. And because a lot of stuff, as you well know, you've read a lot of books, a lot of stuff is somewhat regurgitated. And that's okay because the principles never really change. But I really think you have some insight that I haven't seen for a while. So I'd love you to start out big picture. And what's the difference from your perspective between communication and conversation?
Communication is just communicating information of any type, right? I mean, I can sit here and talk to you without letting you speak for 20 minutes, and I'm communicating to you. Conversation is always an exchange of information between at least two people. The problem we're having right now is that we're communicating when we're supposed to be conversing.
Right.
And so even if two people are talking, what they're doing is just telling the other person things and then waiting to speak again rather than exchanging information.
Yeah. It's interesting. So, physician, heal thyself. I'm a talker by nature. I've always been a talker, but I've always been a good listener. But lately, I was in a situation recently where I just come off stage. I'm all amped up. I'm all fired up. And I'm in this fantastic meeting with these fabulous people I'm really looking forward to talking to and conversing with. And doggone it, by the third time I cut somebody off, I went, what the frost are you doing, Brian? I knew I was a little bit jacked up. I knew I was a little fired up. But I was still in communication mode. And I had not clicked into conversation mode. And it was interesting. I came away all weekend kind of beating myself up. They were people I was really looking forward to talking to. And they were gracious. And they still enjoyed me. But it was not what I wanted it to be because I really did want to conversate. I really did want to interact. I really did want to hear what they had to say. I just had a funny line or whatever else burning us, like a stone in my pocket. So how do we get better? How can we get better at conversation rather than just communication?
First of all, let me give you a little bit of grace here because that happens to all of us. It happens to me. You get excited. You have a lot of stuff to say. Your energy's up, and it can be hard. I'll also say that research from Harvard demonstrates that talking about ourselves and what we like and what we think and what we don't like activates the same pleasure center in your brain as sex and heroin.
Oh,
so it is very pleasurable to talk about what's going on in your head. Yeah. And maybe that helps everybody understand why this can be difficult. Also, conversation is the most sophisticated cognitive task we undertake. And the part of that that's difficult, the most difficult part of it, is the listening. The father of listening, Ralph Nichols, spent his entire career studying this. And this was predated technology, right? No smartphones. And he said at the end of his career, and maybe something like the 1970s, humans are bad listeners. So again, I just want to give people a little bit of grace that this is difficult. But you asked how we get better at it. One of the ways is, you're already ahead on this. One of the ways is that the more you do it, the more you realize how pleasurable it is to listen. And recent studies show that the less you speak in a conversation, the more you enjoy it. And so it'll actually be positively reinformed. There's positive reinforcement there, helping to remind you to listen. The other thing is that one of the things that I had to do when I was very first starting out was I would get a stopwatch and I would time myself talking. Like there's some stories all of us tell repeatedly,
Yeah.
right?
I've been married for 35 years. My wife can recite them.
Right. So I suggest starting with those. Start telling a story that you tell all the time.
Yeah.
And see how long it takes you. Right? And this can help you get an idea of your own pattern so that you start learning, okay, this is when I need to stop. I've told that story and now I need to end. Because, we'll data dump. We'll data dump on people and just tell them everything.
Look, I get paid for talking, and I'm Irish, for goodness sakes. We are storytellers. What did we do? Sit in a pub. Every village had what was called a shanachie, which was the storyteller. So what I do is I'll tell the story, and I can tell a story really well. But then I start adding to it and adding to it. Then I find myself in a new environment, and a story that was great, about a 90-second story, has now become a 5-minute soliloquy, and I have sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Really well told, really entertaining. But I'll say this, you just said something that's hit me between the eyes. I get paid for talking. That's what I do for a living. My most enjoyable experiences of people is hearing their stories, is hearing their conversations. That's the stuff that renews me and inspires me. And so I don't know why. I don't know why that's a trip circuit for me. On occasion, not all the time, but on occasion, that trip circuit gets hit.
And you've proved the research right there, right? You're still thinking about that conversation when you didn't listen. You didn't enjoy it so much that it's still living rent-free in your brain and in your psyche. Right. You're probably not remembering all the really wonderful, pleasurable things that happened. You're going to remember that negative experience.
Right.
So again, we're talking about positive and negative reinforcement. That's going to make you less likely to make that same mistake in the future.
What are the reasons we need to get better at talking to each other? What are the reasons behind it? Yeah.
Well, let me get very meta on you here.
Okay.
Because I wrote that book, I think, in like 2015,
yeah.
and it's only gotten worse. So let me explain something to everyone who still believes that conversation or communication is a soft skill. It is very much not. Our species has only survived because of our conversational skills. We are very fragile as a species. And there's no really logical reason for us to have survived. We're slow. We're really easily killed. We don't have defensive mechanisms like talons and venom, right? You change the temperature a few degrees and we start to get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But what we have is the most sophisticated communication and collaboration on the planet, as far as we know, which means if you're messing with one human, you are almost always messing with more. It's the reason why belonging is the strongest need that our species has after food, shelter, and water, because we only survive as a community. I want to be careful here and make sure nobody thinks this is about liking anybody. Right. It has never been about liking anyone. It's about being able to communicate and collaborate. So why is it important? It's because lately we have seen this precipitous drop in empathy. We've seen a major drop in healthy conversation. Yeah. And for our species, that is a possible extinction event.
Yeah, it's crazy. The politics and everything has been politicized, extremely so.
And we're not doing the thing that we do best in the world, right?
Yeah.
We keep inventing all these replacements for the thing we do best.
Yeah.
We don't need more communication tools.
Right.
This, and I'm leaving out ALS, so that is just as sophisticated, are the most sophisticated communication tools on the planet. But I see people, a phone call comes in, and they'll reject the phone call and text back What's up?
Right.
Right? Your email, your text isn't even close to what you can do with your mouth.
One of the reasons about the book is it was written pre-COVID. And I really feel like I don't think we're going to know for generations all the impact. I can tell you this from my own business, my own company, of the 250 employees at my organization, that half of them don't live in the area anymore. They live in different states. I think we have the most talented people we've ever had in our 30-year existence, very committed people. One of the things that is an awful struggle is collaboration, connectivity. It's extremely hard to have. And, we're working at that harder than we ever have, like I say, in 30 years. And so, you can meet on Zoom, and sometimes it's very efficient. It can be very efficient, but it also seems to lack a lot of effectiveness, that human interaction. And, I used to say more is caught than taught. Just being with somebody and connecting. Like I said, you're out there in D.C. I just went to see my grandkids. And so, I Zoom all the time. I FaceTime all the time with those guys. But there's just something about Grandpa sitting with the three guys around him and on his lap and being with my son and daughter-in-law where nothing's being said at all. That's where the magic is. And so, and then out of that magic came conversations. We had conversations this last weekend that I wouldn't have in 100 Zoom calls or 100 phone calls. And so it's hard to have that community without the proximity. So how do you feel like we need to talk? Which I think, when books are well written, they stand the test of time. I think this is more valuable today than the day you wrote it, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And I would just like to ask your opinion, how do we do this? How do we do this in the age where it is texting instead of calling, where people have chosen isolation over connectivity, and where the structure is, it's more efficient. Everybody stay home, work from home, use Teams, Zoom, everything in between.
It's funny you use the word efficient, because the next book I wrote, Do Nothing, was about how efficiency isn't an end goal. Cancer is really efficient. Efficient is a value neutral proposition, right? Efficiency is not what you're aiming at. It's just something that either helps you or hurts you, right? Instead, we need to be thinking more in terms of what makes Homo sapiens work at its best. And we are not long-lasting thinkers. Okay. Right? We only have maybe even the greatest minds in history, Henri Poincaré, Charles Dickens, like some of the greatest, Charles Darwin, only had about 4 hours of deep thought in them every day. So the first thing about trying to make this all work is that we have to stop working against our own biology and neurology and understand how we work best and give ourselves the environment that's best suited to make us successful. That's number one. Number two is that, the book was written before COVID, and one of the things I'm going to have to do eventually is update it, because we got so much research during the pandemic on remote connection. One of the things we found, for example, is that Zoom is not great. Celeste, when I wrote that book, would have said video conferencing is the next best thing to being in person. Turns out I was super wrong about that. The phone call is the next best thing to be in person.
Right.
So when I am, advising companies and leaders, I'm always telling them, embrace the conference call. I think about if you've ever, Brian, if you've ever called a friend or a family member and they've picked up the phone and said hello, and you say, what's wrong? Right? In a fraction of a second, you have picked up on some sophisticated information.
Right.
Just through the sound of their voice that you can't actually get either in email or even in Zoom, as it turns out. Zoom does not give us all that great biofeedback that really leads to great communication. It's very effective for things like I give keynote speeches over Zoom, totally fine for that. It's that because that's more like watching a movie, right? But in terms of actually helping people to connect, it's counterproductive, and it's also extremely exhausting for our brains. It's cognitively fatiguing, which is why Zoom fatigue is a real thing.
Right.
So, in terms of how do we do this, I feel like we need to start embracing our own humanity, both how that makes us weak, but also what are our strengths? When are we at our best?
Right.
And let's create those kind of environments.
So I have a good friend of mine, and she's marvelous, very talented woman. But she has a little social anxiety, and she's always intimidated in social settings. Now, once she does it and forces herself to do it, she can get into it. How can somebody, two things I want to know. How can somebody become better at conversation, and how can they become more confident in conversation?
So the best thing to do, actually, the advice that works best for people who have any kind of social awkwardness is actually the advice that works best for the rest of us, which is get really good at questions. I was at the TED Summit some years ago, and this nuclear scientist from Japan comes up to me and he says, I've watched your TED Talk like a bunch of times, but you never tell me how to start a conversation. How do I start one? And I said, I saw on his name tag that he was from Kyoto, and I said, I've never been to Kyoto. Is it like Japan? I mean, is it like Tokyo? And he's like, well, you've seen the pictures, the cherry trees and whatever. I'm like, yeah, but is it, cramped with a bunch of apartments? I mean, you don't live in a temple, right? And he starts describing his house. And I'm like, do you have like a yard with a dog and a fence? And he's telling me about his neighborhood. And about 5 minutes in, I say, that's how you start a conversation.
Right.
You ask questions they know the answer to that they care about.
Right.
And this is the same thing that's true for socially awkward people. You can take all of the pressure off yourself by asking them questions that they know the answer to about something they care about.
Now, are we giving them a heroin hit by doing that? Because now they get to talk about themselves?
You are, and you're making them feel great. And follow-up questions, a lot of the study comes from Harvard, but the follow-up questions have this unique power to make people feel that you are likable, that you are trustworthy.
Sure.
To build a bond. So, not just the initial question, but all those follow-up questions that you ask when you are listening really can create these feelings of connectedness.
I had a time, I used to travel a lot. I used to do 200 seminars a year, and I really coveted my family time.
Yeah.
And so I was on this 20-day tour. I get home. It's like midnight wherever I had come from. I think I came back from the East Coast. I land in San Diego. I get to the house, and unbeknownst, my wife had forgotten to mention that a really good friend of ours, their two oldest daughters were in from out of town. And they're New Yorkers, and they were high-energy people bouncing off the walls. I come in the door, and they're ready. Oh, it's Mr. B. And Mr. B is in a coma. And I really have nothing. I'm shot. I've time zoned. I've been adrenalined out. And all I did all night, because I'm I'm a hospitality. I want to host people and so on and so forth. I just asked them questions about themselves all night long. It's all I did.
Yep.
And I got a call from our good friend in New York, and she goes, my daughters are in your fan club. And I go, yeah, what's that all about? And they said you were the most interesting conversationalist they've ever met. I don't remember ever saying hardly a word. I was so shocked. I was just like, well, tell me about this. Well, tell me about that. And so here's the good news. For those of us who might be a little awkward or who are out of sorts, get people talking about themselves and engage and genuinely listen, right? You genuinely had an interest, a point of reference. Tell me about, is it different than, you wanted to know what Kyoto was actually like, and you took an interest and so forth. So now, fast forward that to something that's very, very important in the world I serve today, and that is a lot of the people who are the professionals that I serve, they have to have difficult conversations this day. They have clients that want to move, that can't move. They're in a market that's struggling. They have to sit down to somebody and said, hey, I know I told you your house was worth X. Now it's X minus Y. How do you go about going and having these better conversations when they're difficult conversations to have?
So let me start with general and then some very specific tips for you. Difficult conversations simply require more listening. And every other skill that you use in every conversation. There's conversation books about all these different conversations, right? How to talk to your boss, how to talk to your kid. They're pretty much unnecessary, much respect to all the authors, because research shows us that the skills you need in every conversation are basically the same. The thing with difficult conversations is you have to stretch your empathy so that you're constantly aware of what they need. You have to take stock of yourself and say, am I in this state of mind where I can have this conversation? Am I cranky and am I impatient? When you're stressed, you become less compassionate, you become less patient, you become less cooperative. So you need to take stock for yourself. Is this the right time, or do I need to put a pin in this for a moment? And then take stock of them. What do they need? And then you can just go by listening. One of the main things is giving them the bad news immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The big wind-up a lot of people have
Right.
increases anxiety because they're going to be imagining what it is you want to say, and they're always going to imagine the worst. We're human beings. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. So just tell them right off in the beginning. And then you move forward to the conversation, and you can move forward by asking them.
Right. How do you feel about that? How do you process
How do you feel?
that? What are your
What do
thoughts?
you need?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? How can I help? Then I'm going to give you a couple specific tips. Number one, we have found that if you give people a chance to remind themselves of their own higher values at the beginning of a conversation, it actually keeps them more open-minded and cooperative for 60, 90 minutes after at least. So, I will start the conversation by asking, what's the nicest thing you've done for other people in the past month? Tell me about, and even if you tell them, this is why I'm doing this, because it's going to make our conversation easier, the magic still works. So start that way. The other thing I would say is that removing them from their typical environment is often very helpful. Mm-hmm. Because, when you're in your typical environment, whether you're catching them at home when they're in their wherever they work, their brain will always follow the patterns it does.
Right.
And so what you're trying to do is shake them up a little bit and get them out of those really well-worn patterns so they can think freshly about things. Right. Because you need some innovative thoughts to problem solve.
I love the question, what are you excited about right now?
Right.
And it tends to really engage. And even if I'm having a difficult conversation, like we're going through it, okay, if I could wave a magic wand, what would be the ideal scenario in this situation? And kind of get people to get their heads up off the problem and get a little aspirational. Often you'll find the needs in there, I think, and the motivations in there. And if you're in the service business, like I've been for my whole life, it shows you how to serve.
Yeah, and one of the questions that is almost always going to work is, and what else? Right? Just invite them to continue talking to you. Because sometimes it takes, and interviewers know this, right, Brian? Like sometimes you have to ask a question multiple times before you get a real answer.
Right.
Right? It's kind of like Toyota and his 5 whys, right? You keep asking again and again and again until you finally get to the underlying issues, the real needs and ideas and dreams. So ask it again. Keep asking.
Well, people go, how you doing? Great. Well, if everybody who ever told me they were doing great was doing great, we wouldn't need all the antidepressants that are in the world. Because I've met millions of people, and everybody tells me they're doing great, But it's like, and actually, I'll confess to this. When I met my wife in 1986, I was, the Irish guy off the plane. I could talk and tell a story, and she goes, "How are you doing?" I go, "Great." And then she looked at me and she goes, "How you really doing?" And it was like, oh my gosh. This woman has X-ray eyes, you know what I mean? And I started telling her, and but it cut through the garbage pretty quick, and it let me know she was actually interested. She wanted to know who I was and what I was up to and what was really going on.
Yeah, and it's you built a whole relationship off of that. Not just that, but that's where that started,
it
right?
Did.
There's a real connection to be made when someone feels heard. Right? There's a power in being heard. And I'll often ask people when I'm doing keynotes or workshops or whatever, I'll say, I want you to take a moment and think about the last time you felt heard, really heard. And I give them like 30 seconds because there's a special power to that.
Yeah.
And we can give that to other people.
Well, I've asked on 1,000 appointments over the years to a client, and I'll say, tell me about a bad experience you had with a real estate agent. And people are terrified to ask this question. But I want to know. And the number one answer I've heard to that is somebody saying, I didn't feel heard. They didn't listen to me. They were providing answers that weren't questions I was asking. And I think whether it be productivity, whether it be sales, whether it be service, whether it be family, whether it be relations or even confrontation, people need to feel heard. And I believe that when people feel heard, for the most part, they get diffused. You know?
Totally agree with that. And, one of the things I talk about in the book, and if anyone's interested, all the receipts are in there, but is the very tough fact that the higher your intellect and the more experience and expertise you have in a subject matter, the worse of a conversationalist you are. Your conversational skills go down almost in an inverse ratio.
Wow.
And it's mostly because when you become an expert, you approach every conversation in terms of what you want to tell them instead of what you want to hear.
Well, in the book, and we don't have time for it today, you have 10 actionable steps to improve communication. Maybe just let's hit on the top 3 for you, and it'd be great little how-tos for some folks before I ask you a few questions and get out the door.
So let's start with one that's connected to what I just said, which is learning how to say, I don't know. Which in our age of Google, we always had a tough time saying I don't know, but we now believe that we can do a quick Google search and read a couple paragraphs and have an educated opinion.
Right.
But we need to let people be experts in their fields. Right? Everybody knows how it feels when somebody comes and tells you how to do your job when you've been doing it for 25 years, right? So don't do that to other people. Learn how to say,
and I'll
I don't
throw
know.
in my 2 cents there. I started in real estate when I was 19 years old, and I'm trying to sell people's single largest investment. And they'd say to me, well, Brian, I like you. I like what you're about. I like what you've shown me. But you're very young. And I go, yeah, I am. And I may not know all the answers to all the problems we face, but I promise you this, I'll find you every answer, and I'll find people who know those answers. I never had anybody not do business with me once I said that to them. So I think I don't know is a magical one.
It increases trust. I don't know, but I'll find out. Yeah.
Give me another one.
Another one I will say is that going with the flow. We know that within 5 to 10 seconds of someone else speaking, most of us immediately start thinking about what we're going to say in response. And we also know that you cannot both think about what you're going to say and listen at the same time.
Yep.
They use the same parts of the brain. So as soon as you have held on to what your response is while you're holding on to that, you're not hearing anything. And so you gotta, it's not like you can prevent those thoughts from coming in your mind. Your brain's always going to be talking to you, but we have to learn how to let them come in and let them go straight out and return to listening. And that is a discipline. It just takes practice.
And also, for me, you'll see me here, I'm taking notes. And again, I'm 40 years in business, and I would tell people, would it be okay if I take notes? Just to let them know. And again, I'm not doing this at a party. I'm not doing this at a social function. But when I'm in this type of setting, I'm really trying to learn from you. You're an expert in your field. And I want to take notes. And then I'll often say, so what I'm hearing you say is.
Right.
And then sometimes people will re-clarify. Sometimes they'll restate it. And then we both kind of understand it differently. Because again, people aren't rehearsing their answers all day long, right? So I just think going with that flow like that is beautiful. Give me one last one. These are great tips, by the way.
The last one is to just be brief. We most of us don't have a good idea of how long we've been talking. And so this is where your stopwatch is really going to help you. But also, I had a tendency to interrupt people and, talk for a really long time and get excited and, start gabbing. And so I told my friends and colleagues, hey, I'm trying to work on this. So if I've been talking too long, tug my sleeve. Put up your finger. Let me know. And it broke me of the habit pretty quickly. So A, you only have 30 to 60 seconds of anybody's attention span. And B, human beings can only hold maybe 3 or 4 things in their brain at any one time. So if you tend to data dump, you're wasting your breath.
Right.
They will not retain the information you're telling them.
Brilliant stuff. The book is We Need to Talk. There's 7 more principles where those last 3 golden ones came from, and a whole bunch more. It's a powerful book. I know you've done many other things since that, and we're very excited to get people turned on to you, Celeste. You have some great wisdom, great research, and you're a great communicator. And if we can for a second, I want to give you a little dopamine hit yourself, because there's 5 questions we ask every guest, because we want to know a little bit about you and where you come from. And it creates this constant for our audience to kind of get a flavor for you. So here we go, if you're up for that.
Okay, I'm up.
What's the single best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The single best piece of advice is to not worry about doubting myself. Doubting yourself is healthy.
Who gave you that?
One of my voice teachers at the University of Michigan.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah.
Here it is, University of Michigan. We got that. See, now I know. Go blue.
Go blue.
Yeah, great. What one talent or gift do you wish you possessed that you currently don't?
Drawing.
Okay.
I wish I could draw. I cannot.
That's great. What's the book that's been most instrumental in your life? You're a very well-read person. This will be a hard one.
That is a hard one. I mean, I guess I'd have to go back to something I read as a child, which would have been Charles Dickens. The first Dickens book I read was Pickwick Papers, which nobody chooses as their favorite.
Yeah.
But like he's so good at capturing humanity, like capturing personalities. I think it sort of helped me develop a curiosity in other people. So,
Wow. Who
yeah.
knew? Who knew? He was a genius.
He
a
was.
Genius, yeah. I don't know if you're a big movie watcher, but what's the one movie you watch over and over again, or you stop, or it's kind of like, oh, it's if it's on, you'll take
If
them-
it's
take
on,
them-
I will watch it.
Yeah.
Actually, it's almost never on, but it's 12 Angry Men.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the black and white one.
Henry
with
Ford.
Henry Ford.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Oh, yeah, that was awesome. Talk about conversation.
Talk about conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
And-
Okay. Last but not least, Celeste, what's a good life mean to you?
Making the world a better place, like being of service to the people I care about, to everybody.
Well, there's one other person gave me that answer in person, almost word for word. Would you like to know who it was?
Sure.
Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. So you're in pretty good company there, girl. Pretty good company.
Yeah, my tombstone, if I have one, will probably say she did her best.
Well, you did your best today. It's been just a treat to meet you. You have so much more and so much depth to this. The book is We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. I encourage you to check out Celeste Headlee. Celeste, where can they find out more information about you?
I have a website, celesteheadlee.com, and my nonprofit is headwaytraining.org.
Fantastic. Brilliant woman, great insights. We're very, very thankful to her today. And I'm going to finish today's podcast, as you guys know, for the best part of 8 years. My mother was always the voice of the podcast. She recently passed. And so we've retired mom's salute, and I'm going to do it myself here in the years to come. So as my grandfather and my mom always said, may the roads rise up to meet you, may the wind always be at your back. May the rain fall soft upon your fields and the sun shine warm upon your face. And until we meet again, may God hold you all in the hollow of his hand. We'll see you next time.